Hello, sister.
Hello.
I'm Sarah,
I'm Casey.
and we are Relatively Dark. How are you today?
I'm alright. Tired, like always.
Me too, like always.
Anywho.
What do you think about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard? Because I know that's your man.
I do like Johnny Depp. I feel like you can never really know, but I do feel like Amber is a liar.
Mm-hmm. Same. I feel that too.
Yeah, I haven't kept up with it a whole lot, but some of the little reels and TikToks on there are pretty funny, so.
I was telling people at work last night, I want a shirt that has a picture of Johnny Depp, and it just says, "That's hearsay."
Oh gosh, yeah, that one
If
was
anybody
funny.
wants to make me that shirt, let me know.
It's pretty funny. So, we have an extra one this week
Yes, we
To
do,
make up.
as promised,
for the short one.
for the short one
Earlier.
and the really depressing one. So I
Yep.
said that it was going to be a little lighter. It's not. But it's not about like a specific person. It's not about a child.
Always good.
I guess I should give a trigger warning because this one is very grotesque.
Okay.
It's got
fine
a lot.
with it.
It's got a lot of cringe sprinkled in there. So
Sprinkled or like dumped?
dumped.
Okay. Fair
Yeah,
warning.
It
you guys.
is, filled with, what did I say?
Cringe.
Cringe. Filled with cringe. Okay, anyways. We're going to talk about medieval torture devices and public executions.
Interesting.
So, I'm going to start with the torture devices. And a lot of this stuff can kind of be interchangeable between a torture device and public execution.
Okay.
But the way I laid it out, I'm going to do what's basically just torture devices first.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm kind of excited because I don't know if you're going to be like, oh, that's nasty, or like really, really grossed out.
I don't know, like normally that stuff doesn't really bother me, like gore,
Yeah.
guts, blood. But I mean, I might be like, oh, they did that? But I don't think I'll be like, oh, my femur.
That's something I would say.
Really?
Oh.
No idea.
Okay, so the first one we are going to talk about is the collar.
Oh, okay.
See?
Sounds
that.
creepy.
Okay. This was made from iron, which is shocker, Middle Ages. Everything's freaking iron. There were spikes all around it and on the inside, aimed at the neck. And it would hold the neck in a single position to where you couldn't move it at all. And they would tighten it just enough to be uncomfortable, but the spikes wouldn't pierce your skin.
Okay.
But the victims would have to go days without being able to lay down. They couldn't rest their head. They couldn't
Ugh.
eat. They couldn't swallow. Just imagine days
Yeah.
to where you can't move your head at all.
Yeah.
Ugh. That's all I have on that one.
Oh, okay.
These are like really short ones. The other ones have a little bit
Oh,
more
okay.
detail. The next one is the heretic's fork. It was a fork at both ends,
Okay.
like two little prong spike things.
Mm-hmm.
One sat under the victim's chin,
Mhm.
and the other one was nestled on their throat. So you couldn't lower your head at all, or it would stab you.
Man.
And this was the torturer's way of keeping sinners looking up at God.
What?
Yeah. I mean, it's good. You should always look to God, but
No, that's messed up.
that's not the right reasoning or way to do that.
Right.
The iron chair.
Okay.
It was a chair.
Was it? Was it a
With-
couch or a stool or?
The iron chair was a chair.
Gosh.
And it had iron spikes
Okay.
covering every inch of it. So it would pierce every point of contact of the person that had to sit in it.
Ew.
So it had arms to it. So your arms, your hands, your back, your booty, everything.
Legs.
Legs, yes. They would pierce you deep enough to break the skin, but not deep enough to like puncture your organs or anything like that.
Okay.
And the victims, they wouldn't even really bleed while they were on the chair because the spikes
Right.
were like plugging their wounds.
Right.
So then once they got off of the chair, then they would bleed. To me, I feel like it would be worse getting up off of the chair
Well, yeah,
than sitting on it.
because that's instant blood loss.
Exactly. Like you'd stand up and then you're done.
Just like that.
Maybe. That may be how it works. I don't know. I wasn't there. Okay, next one. The knee splitter. So there were 2 spiked wooden blocks, and then there was a screw on the back of them.
2 spiked wooden blocks with the screw on the back. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
trying
kind of hard to picture it.
Yeah.
I will post a picture to our Instagram, though.
Okay.
One was clamped on the front of the knee, and one was clamped on the back of the knee.
Mm-mm.
So on each side of your knee, you had these wooden spikes, basically. And then they would turn that screw,
Yeah.
and once they turned it, your knee's getting messed up.
Pulling the 2 pieces of wood together.
Yes. They're slowly turning it, and it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter until basically your knee is crushed. Next is the lead sprinkler. I almost said the lead sprinkler, and that is incorrect. So this was a handle with a small ball on the end, and the ball would be filled with molten lead or boiling oil,
Okay.
and this was dribbled onto the victim's body, slowly burning them. And so this torture would go on until the person inflicting it decided it was fine to go ahead and kill them.
Okay.
And they would do this by pouring molten silver into the victim's eyes.
What?
Ugh,
I don't know. I watch a lot of old shows. I feel like I may have seen something along those lines.
you might have. It's super messed up.
I watched a lot of the Viking shows, which are really good, by the way.
You'll like one of them in here that we get to.
Okay.
I mean, not like it. You know what I mean. Up next, we have the Iron Maiden.
Okay.
This was a coffin-like mechanism with spikes on the
Oh,
inside.
yeah.
So think Miss Trunchbull's Chokey in
Yeah.
Matilda. The spikes were strategically placed where they would pierce all of your vital organs,
Golly.
but they weren't very long, so the victim would just slowly bleed to death for hours. And 2 spikes were purposely placed to penetrate your eyes.
What is with them in their eyes?
I don't know. Them and spikes and your eyeballs, like
That's crazy.
they're on one back then, I'm telling you.
Next.
Next, the head crusher.
Sorry. Head crusher. Okay. Golly.
Your chin sat on a little surface, like when you go to the eye doctor
Or dentist.
or
To
dentist
take x-rays.
or other places.
Okay.
So your chin sat on that, and they put a metal cap on your head, and they would have these screws that they turned, and your head would quite literally be crushed.
Ew, okay.
Just slowly, just... brain matter
Golly.
would seep out of popped eye sockets.
What?
Yeah, like their eyes would literally pop out, and then their brain would be coming through their eyeball
Okay, yeah,
sockets.
this is pretty bad.
Yeah, it just gets worse as we go.
Okay, man.
Their teeth would break,
Oh my gosh.
and their bones would be crushed. You get the idea.
Yeah, I mean, the bones crushing, that one wasn't weird to me. Like that.
Yeah.
The brains out of eye. My bad.
Every time.
Brains out of eye sockets. That was not. I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this next one. All my ladies, just hug yourself. Okay? Protect yourself. The next one is called the breast ripper.
Oh no. I don't know if I'm ready for this one.
This is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll explain it anyways.
We need to know how.
It was a claw-like device. Yes, a claw-like device with spikes.
Of course, why not?
Of course. Often it was heated up before it was used to rip off a woman's breasts.
Oh my gosh.
There was another version of this called the spider, which is basically the same thing, but instead of a person getting all the pleasure of doing it themselves, it was attached to a wall. But yeah,
Ew.
so
She just patted herself.
whatever we're talking about, the body part that is getting obliterated, it makes you just want to make sure yours are okay.
Like when you wake up from a dream, are my teeth still there?
Exactly.
Gosh.
Up next, we have the tub.
Okay, that one
The
doesn't
tub.
sound too bad.
Well, the victim's hands and feet were bound, and their face would be smeared with honey. Well, they were bound and they were put in like this stand-up tub.
A stand-up tub?
Basically like a big bucket.
Okay.
Well, with the honey on their face, insects that bite, like flies, ants, so on and so forth, they would eat the honey, and then after they had their little snack, they would crawl into the openings in the face. Victims would be force-fed in order to keep them alive. Eventually, they'd be stuck in their own waste because they can't go nowhere. This led to maggots.
Oh.
And they would eat the victim's body as they decayed while they were alive.
Ugh.
So this was a very slow, agonizing, disgusting death.
Yeah, like I feel like I do better with guts and gore than I do with insects.
Moving on.
Please.
The Pear of Anguish. P-E-A-R.
Okay.
This is a device.
Did it look like a pear?
It is shaped like a pear.
Oh, cool.
You're so smart.
Thanks.
It was made up of 4 little leaves that opened, and they were joined by a hinge at the top, and it had a crank on the end.
Okay, totally need pictures.
Yes, I will post pictures of all this stuff. So this was placed inside an orifice, and gradually they would use that crank and expand it. Sometimes they would put this in the victim's mouth or down their throat, which would eventually cause the skull to shatter. Other times they would put it in the lower half of the body, as in the booty or the front booty. And this was, as you can imagine, excruciating, but that rarely killed them.
Oh my god.
So they would live through, I mean, not the skull, obviously, but
Yeah.
the other end, it would not kill them most of the time.
That's insane.
So they had to live through that. I told you, this gets worse as we go on.
Well, see, whenever you said this device shaped like a pear, I was imagining like something bigger.
No, it's a
Like-
little on the small
I
side.
thought people were going to be fit inside of it, not the other way around. Sorry. Sorry. My bad.
Okay. Moving right along. The Spanish donkey.
Okay.
This was a triangular board.
Okay.
Imagine like a balance beam, like for gymnastics, but it came to a point, like a prism.
Okay.
Like, what's that candy bar that they get at airports all the time? A Toblerone?
Toblerone?
It's shaped like that.
Okay.
And it's wooden. The victims...
Did it have like the little slits in it too, or was it solid all the way?
It was solid all the way.
Okay.
The victim was forced to sit on it and straddle it.
Okay.
This victim was usually a woman. They would tie weights around their ankles.
Oh my gosh.
And they would gradually put more weights on those until the victim was literally split down the middle.
What?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And what did they do? Just sit around and be like, what else can we do to people?
Pretty much. I really do think.
Goodness. That's insane.
Yeah. Next we have the wheel.
Okay.
The victim would be tied to a large wheel, basically a huge, like, wagon wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd put pieces of wood underneath all of their major joints.
Oh gosh.
Their wrists, ankles, hips, shoulders, knees.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would hammer those wood pieces, obviously breaking the victim's bones. Then they would braid their limbs
What?
into the wheel spokes and display the victim's body for everyone to see it until they eventually died.
My
So they would be alive, and
goodness.
they would braid like their legs and arms around these spokes. And then everybody would be like, oh, look, that person got wheeled.
Pretty sure that's not how they said it. Oh, look, they got wheels. Look at there.
Probably not. But people, I mean, public executions and torture and stuff
Well,
like
yeah,
that.
like, I mean, I know that they used to, you know, the hangings, and then they'd leave them up there, like, as a warning or whatever, but this is a whole nother level of insanity.
Well, we're going to level up.
Oh, gosh.
Level up, level up. I think that's a song. Anyways. Let's move on to saw torture.
Oh, great. Yay.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
There was a saw. There was torture.
Next.
Basically, living victims would be sawed in half.
Oh, great.
They would either go across, like, their belly, or they would saw them in half lengthwise.
Oh.
Which sometimes the victim would be hung upside down by their ankles.
Okay.
And they would start between the legs.
Ugh.
And they'd have a person on each side with one of them big saws and just go back and forth all the way down.
Ugh.
Yeah. Up next, we have the rack.
Okay.
The victim's ankles were strapped at the bottom. Their wrists were strapped at the top. You know, their arms and legs were stretched out. And they would use these cranks, levers, whatever, and they would just stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch until their joints would be dislocated.
Uh-huh.
And if they didn't confess to whatever crime they were torturing them for, they would just be literally ripped apart.
Ugh.
Limb from limb.
Yeah.
The last torture method I have is rat torture.
Oh, gosh.
The prisoner would be restrained while laying on a horizontal surface.
Uh-huh.
And a rat would be put on top of him and covered with a container.
Okay.
Then they'd heat up the container, causing the rat to freak out and try and claw its way out.
Oh, gosh.
But where's the rat gonna go?
Yeah, it dug its way underneath the container through the person.
There's only one way that it can get out. So it goes through the body of the prisoner.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the prisoner, obviously, alive.
Of course.
During this. So this rat is clawing into your stomach or your chest or
wherever they put
wherever. And clawing all through your body and in your organs and stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it can only get out through so many openings.
Ugh.
So now, let's talk about some public executions.
Okie dokie.
Execution method number 1, beheadings. They believed it to be more humane, a more humane way of executing people. They considered it honorable because it was the least painful. So it was usually reserved for royalty.
Huh.
The earliest victims of beheading were typically subjected to an axe.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it didn't take just one swoop. They probably had to chop a little more. It wasn't until later when swords were used, offering a lot quicker death.
Oh, okay.
A lot more speedier. The victim would either stand or kneel upright. And they had them do this instead of like placing their head on a piece of wood. Because if they did that, then the sword would get embedded into the wood. And they don't have time to mess with all that.
Okay.
They have heads to chop off.
Okay.
Some of the victims of beheadings were Mary, Queen of Scots. She was in prison for 19 years before they beheaded her. And she supposedly told the executioner, "I hope you shall make an end of all my troubles." Anne Boleyn is another one. On the day she was executed, she allegedly said, "I heard say the executioner was very good, and I have a little neck."
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I guess she was like, "He's good. I have a little neck. It'll be over like that."
That's crazy.
The Countess of Salisbury, even though she was a member of high society, an axe was used to behead her. Apparently the executioner was young and he didn't have like any experience. And he, quote, hacked her head and shoulders to pieces.
Oh, my goodness.
So hers wasn't as smooth. Hers was brutal.
Ugh.
Next, we have immurement.
What?
Immurement.
Okay.
I had to write out how to pronounce that because I kept wanting to say, like, immurement. Immurement.
Okay.
The victim would either be locked in a coffin-like box or sealed up in a wall.
Okay.
The Roman Catholic Church often used this method to punish nuns or monks who had broken their chastity vows. Usually, they would be sealed inside a room with openings just big enough to give them food and water. They had no contact with the outside world, total isolation, and they would be in there for days, weeks, sometimes even months before they eventually died.
Golly.
Just imagine. Like, all you have is just wall.
Yeah.
And, like, you didn't have room to move or nothing. I don't even think I'm claustrophobic, but I would be super claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Next is death by elephant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Even though elephants aren't violent by nature, they don't have like a urge to kill people, they can be trained to kill a person, and they can even be trained to torture someone before killing them, like breaking all their bones before they finally crush their head.
What?
This form of execution was usually saved for enemy soldiers who had committed tax evasion and theft.
Oh, okay.
Normally, they would just let the weight of the elephant, do its thing and crush them. But sometimes they'd get a little creative. For example, a sultanate made a public display of fitting pointed blades on the elephant's tusks and training it to use those blades to cut people open.
Oh.
This was practiced for centuries in countries such as India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Now let's talk about gibbets.
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 Okay.
Criminals would be locked in a human-shaped metal cage, and they'd hang these cages up in a public place.
Okay.
They would do it about 30 feet high so no one would take it down because people, the smell alone. Ew. Yeah. But they would hang them up as, like you said earlier, a warning. Sometimes they were already dead when they hung them up, but sometimes they'd be hung up alive and then they'd later die from exposure, starvation, whatever. And these would hang there for years with the body still in it.
Yeah.
There's actually gibbets still on display in the UK.
What?
One even has part of a skull still.
What?
Yeah. And it was eventually declared illegal in 1834.
Crazy.
Alrighty. Have you ever heard of hanged, drawn, and quartered?
Ugh.
I think that is a new.
No, but I have an idea.
Well, the person was hanged, drawn, and quartered, but it was in a different order, so I don't understand.
Oh, okay.
First, they would be drawn. The drawn in it is because they would get drugged behind a horse that they were tied to, and they would take them to where they were going to be killed. Sometimes the drawn in it refers to the victim's intestines being drawn out of their body later on in this process. Hanged, obviously, but in most cases, but in most cases, they didn't die from the hanging. They would hang them until they were like right on the cusp of death, and then they'd stop because they wanted them to be alive for the next part. Before they got to the quartering part of this, the victim would be castrated. Their genitals and sometimes intestines would be thrown into the fire, and then they would be decapitated.
Goodness.
Yeah. Next came the quartering. They would literally quarter them. Chop them into at least 4 pieces. They would put the pieces into a boiling mix of spices. And they did this to keep the birds from picking at the body parts because they would be publicly displayed as a warning.
Oh,
so they didn't want them all messed up. The most famous victim of this was a man named William Wallace, and he was actually tied to 4 horses, 1 to each of his limbs.
Oh, gosh.
And then the horses were sent running in different directions.
Whoa.
So he was like the rat, just...
Goodness.
torn apart.
Oh, that's bad.
That's bad. Crushing is the next one.
Oh, okay. That doesn't sound so bad.
Not crushing as in like, he's cute. This method was mainly used by the British.
Okay.
They used large stones or pretty much anything that was heavy. What's crazy is the people condemned to this method hadn't even been found guilty of anything yet, but they did it to try and force them into confessing, which is why I said some of this stuff doubles as torture and execution. But weight would slowly be added on top of the person until they suffocated.
Okay.
A lot of times their bones would break, obviously, during this process, and then they would just like protrude from their skin.
Ew.
One well-known case of crushing was Margaret Clitheroe.
Okay.
She was crushed to death in 1586 because she refused to plead guilty to practicing Catholicism and harboring priests.
Okay.
They stripped her naked, they tied her arms and legs with rope, and they laid a door on top of her. They ended up putting about 800 pounds of stones on top of the door before her spine snapped and her
gosh.
ribs burst through her skin.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But she was later named a saint by the Catholic Church in 1970.
So she did this?
Huh?
So she actually did that? She helped these people, right?
I'm assuming yes. The crushing method was also used a lot during the Salem witch trials. But we'll probably cover that at some point, so I didn't want to,
Oh, yeah.
give too many details ahead of time.
Yeah.
Next, we have death by boiling.
Ew.
As you could probably guess, victims of this method were placed in a large vat of heated liquid, sometimes water, sometimes oil, sometimes wax.
I don't know. I feel like that would be worse than water. I don't know why.
And sometimes even molten lead. Ugh. Essentially, they would cook them, basically. I said the liquid was heated, not boiling, because sometimes it hadn't reached a boil when the victims were forced in. So their outer layers of their skin would cook first, then their organs. Very slow process. It'd be quick if it was boiling when they got in, and sometimes people would just dunk their heads in to boil their brain to get it over with. If they were conscious for the beginning parts, though, like if it wasn't boiling when they put them in there, they'd feel their eyes burning, blisters just coming up everywhere, clothes melting into their skin.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, that is death by boiling.
That's awful.
That is awful.
Gosh, I don't know which one would be the worst. Oh, you're not done yet.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, gosh.
Next, impalement.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh.
Probably the most infamous facilitator.
Sorry, I can't.
What?
Oh, look, I've been impaled. Frozen. I can't. I'm sorry.
The most infamous facilitator of impalement is Vlad the Impaler. He reigned over, I found two different pronunciations. I don't know which one's right. So he either reigned over Wallachia, or Wallachia.
Okay.
I like Wallachia, but it's Romania now. What is now Romania?
Oh, I thought you were going to say like Welsh or something.
No.
Okay.
So he reigned over Romania in the 1400s.
Okay.
If I tell you that he killed a crap ton of people, how many would you think?
Oh, gosh.
Like, what would you think would be like a crap ton of people for him to have killed?
Well, I don't know. Some people think like hundreds would be a lot. Some people think tens of hundreds. I was going to say like tens, like 50 might be a lot. But some people think like thousands would be a lot. I mean, I don't know.
It's estimated that he killed around 80,000 people.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
20,000 of those being killed by impalement.
Oh, my gosh. So he didn't just impale people?
No.
Golly.
He actually inspired the character Count Dracula.
What?
Yes. Not to be confused with Count Chocula.
Oh.
So here's how it was done. A sharpened stake would be planted in the ground, sharpened up, and the victim would be placed on the spike alive.
Of course.
Through the butt, if it was a man.
Man.
Through the front butt, if it was a woman.
Oh, my gosh.
So this stake would just obliterate their insides until they died.
How big was the stake?
Well, the stake would often extend through their neck or throat.
Oh, my gosh.
Or their shoulders.
Golly.
I mean, it was like, it's kind of morbid, but like a skewer.
Yeah.
At times,
I was not thinking that. I was thinking like impaled through like
through your belly and out your
heart
back.
or something.
No.
Ew.
Lengthwise. At times, victims endured this for hours and sometimes days before they had the sweet release of death.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Well.
Okay, we are on the last one. We are in the home stretch.
I'm excited, but I'm like, ugh.
The Viking Blood Eagle. You know what it is?
I know what it is.
Okay, well. This was specifically designed for revenge and ritual torture. Only 2 existing accounts of this technique. The king of Northumbria, Isla, He was accused of killing a Viking leader by throwing him into a pit of snakes.
That was Ragnar Lothbrok.
Yes, it was. I didn't put his name in here, but see?
They're based on real people. I mean, I don't know if the actual stories really happened.
It's debated, just like
Legend,
anything from like that far back. The article I read didn't say what the other one was, the other account of it happening, so I'm not sure. But, like you said, I have in my notes, there's a lot of debate on if the Vikings really did use this method, but if they did, this is what they would do.
It's gruesome, y'all.
It is. This is why I have a trigger warning at the beginning. The victim's hands and legs would be tied. The executioner would stab them in the tailbone and slide the knife up to the rib cage. Oh, my back just like, I can feel it tingling. Then they would carefully separate each rib from the spine with an axe. Now, obviously, the internal organs are exposed now.
Mm-hmm.
To keep them awake, because of course they're about to pass out from pain, they'd rub salt in this wound, this gaping wound on their back. And then they would pull out their lungs and just lay them nicely on their back like two bloody wings. And I have a picture of this too, like a
more like an
sketch
illustration
of it.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know how you would ever have a picture of it.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't post that. So I want to end this lovely episode with a passage from the main article that I read for my research.
Mm-hmm.
It is from a website called All That's Interesting. I think it pretty much sums everything up.
Okay.
It says, ultimately, it appears that medieval executions attempted to show how egregious a crime was, but instead ended up showing us just how much bloodlust people have had throughout history.
Yeah.
And that, my dear friends, is medieval public executions and torture devices.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And there's more.
Yeah.
Like, I could do a second part to this.
Oh, really?
Yes. Like, if you enjoyed this one because you're weird and creepy like us, then let us know and we can do a part 2 down the line. I hope you enjoyed your little bonus episode for this week.
I did.
this much lighter episode.
I like it because of the history behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's messed up. Like,
It's
tons
just
of thousands.
interesting.
It is. I think it's crazy that they did so much.
Mm-hmm. It's like they just sat around, you know.
Like I said, tried to think of ways to make it worse.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't just pick a couple different ways to execute people or torture people. They had, like, apparently more than what you even said.
Yeah.
What?
There is more.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, yeah. Thanks to everybody for listening.
Thank you.
We have our email. Send case suggestions, theories about cases, personal stories to relativelydarkpodcast@gmail.com.
Follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, see?
Hope you have a good weekend.
Yes.
You'll hear from us again on Monday.
You will on Monday. You hear that?
Monday.
On Monday, you hear? All right, bye.
Bye.